every Tuesday. I normally don't do lives on Tuesday, but this is a special event. Not only is it the very last episode of Mavens of Manufacturing for 2025, but it's manufacturing month. So everybody who's in love with manufacturing is doing their thing. And we have a lot of events that are lined up, and one of which is called RoboBusiness, which is going to be happening October 15th through 16th in Santa Clara at the Santa Clara Convention Center. I'm super jealous because in Wisconsin it's starting to get cold, so I wish I could make it during that time, but I'm not going to be able to make it. But we have a very special guest who's actually going to be speaking at that event. Please join me in welcoming Vivian Chu. Hello, Vivian. How are you doing?
Hello. Good. We're excited to talk about what robots in high-risk environments. What does that mean? And to give a little bit of a.
So just a heads up, Vivian, your sound is coming in and out. I just want to let you know. I don't know if you need to make some adjustments on your microphone, but I just wanted to give you a heads up on that.
Okay. I need to earlier. Please. Is this still choppy now?
I don't know quite yet. We'll keep having the conversation.
We'll keep going. We'll keep going. Yeah. Sounds great.
Yeah. But I do want to give you a chance to just introduce yourself and explain how you entered in the world of robotics. And you are the co-founder and chief innovation officer at Diligent Robotics. So can you give us kind of the backstory of how you entered into robotics and automation and how that led you to where you're at today with Diligent?
Yeah. And then definitely let me know if my audio is still choppy. But so started Diligent in 2018, and what really led to this moment of starting Diligent and really thinking about how we put robots in the world next to people for me is started many years earlier, right? So just like everyone else, early days where taking apart things in the house, right? All your parents were upset. You're like, you took it apart, you didn't necessarily put it back together, right? And so that for me was classic early days where they're like, okay, I think you need to study engineering. And of course, went to school and started to study computer science, electrical engineering. But early in school, it was very clear that the things on a screen weren't that interesting, right? And then by the time I got to my senior year, I took my first robotics class where one of the assignments was you get a Roomba I create where you get to program it to explore the world. You have an accelerometer on it, right? And you get to program it to climb a hill automatically. And for me, that was the aha moment where, okay, take technology, interact with the world, impact the world, change the world. And unfortunately, that was my senior year. I was like, wait, it's my senior year. I've just discovered this. What do I do, right? And so for me, that launched a long time in academia where I went on and did my master's and my PhD in robotics just because I couldn't get enough of trying to understand how robots can work. Early days, you're literally programming every single thing all the way till in my graduate studies where we really started to look at learning from demonstration and robot learning from people and how do you put people and robots side by side. And that for me was because I started to see the future, what we were writing in all of our papers at that point of robots and people were going to work side by side. Robots were going to make a difference, change lives. But then in academia, you write that next paper, you film that one video of your robot doing something, and then you go on. And I wasn't getting to make that impact. And so that was huge for me and with my co-founder as well, saying, you know what, why don't we actually go and do that? Why don't we actually go and change the world? Like we say in our papers, the technology is starting to be ready. When we started the company in 2018, the cost of hardware had gone down from like $1 million or $500,000 to build one of these robots to 100,000, and now it's gone even cheaper, right? And so that order of magnitude decrease in hardware, as well as all the advances in machine learning, like those things were all coming together to say this is the time where we should put robots out there and start to impact lives. And so that's what got That's what got Diligent started in my career, really thinking about going from academia, where it's all theoretical, teaching robots, all the way to now putting robots out in the world, where we have um, over 90 robots deployed at over 25 different hospitals, working 24/7 making deliveries. And we've done over 1.2 million deliveries to date, and saves the staff. We were calculating somewhere like 500,000 hours saved across our fleet so far. So we're super excited.
That's awesome. So robots, I mean, come in all shapes and sizes, and humanoids are one of those things. What kinds of robots are you actually deploying in hospitals, and what are some of the challenges that they're helping hospital staffs really overcome? Like, how are they assisting them in that type of environment?
Yeah, great question. So, our first product is Moxi. So, Moxi is what we call minimum viable humanoid, is kind of how we joke. The robot is on wheels, it has one arm, it has a head, so it's socially expressive. And we picked this form factor honestly because this is what we felt like this was like truly minimum viable. These are the things you need. And we take a very practical approach to the form factor. You need to be able to wheel around. The hospitals are ADA compliant, so you don't have to worry about stairs. And at the same time, hospitals have elevators and doors, and in order to navigate hospital wide and make an impact and difference, have to be able to interact the environment. Moxie goes around the hospital running things around that normally would take away people from patients. So things like medication, lab supplies, lightweight equipment, all the things that have to move around in order for the day to day to happen, for patient care to happen, are things that Moxie helps transport. And so, in order to navigate through the hospital, you have to ride elevators, like I mentioned, open lots of doors. There's some hospitals that have 100 doors. So, if you go into a hospital and you say, I'm going to have to put a control box on every single one of your doors and all your elevators in order for you to start to use the product, that's a non starter for a lot of healthcare systems. And so, that's why we said we needed an arm. So, that's one minimum viable piece, right? You have to have an arm to interact with the world. And then finally,
Mhm.
having a head means that you can communicate really with people, right? So people in the environment, this is not a setting where you're going to train every single person who's going to interact with a robot. There are people who've never seen the robot, their patients, their families all around, that you can't say this is what to expect. And so by having a head, you can actually communicate intent. So we have some of our main sensors in the head. So when the robot is going to go interact with an elevator button or a badge, like a button to open an ADA, like a automated door, the robot first looks at it and then pushes that. And then that already gives that natural signal like, hey, the robot's about to move, the robot's going to do that. And so that's what we've really landed on for our first product in terms of form factor, because that's what you need realistically to deliver value to our customers.
How has the reaction been from both the hospital staff and patients? So, like for me, I would totally geek out if I saw like a robot coming in. I still have yet to go into a restaurant that has the robotic servers, but I'm in this industry, so it's not something. And I'm a huge fan of like Star Wars and Back to the Future, so I'm not like someone who has maybe a fear factor involved in seeing a robot. I know that can be a reaction to someone who might not be within this sector. So, what have been some of the reactions when you first deploy your fleet into these environments?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Um, there, like you mentioned, there's people with all sorts of backgrounds, and so when we deploy, we get to experience that. Interestingly enough, once you explain what the robot is there to do, right, to allow the staff members to focus on their patients and do the parts of their jobs they love the most, it's pretty
Mhm.
fast to get on board with Moxie, right? They're like, "Oh, so you're saying that the robot will then take these labs down and then I can do other things, or I can even go get a coffee or eat lunch because otherwise in my 12-hour day I can't?" Like that generates real excitement. And then
Mhm.
when you like Moxie has we have right AI under the hood and can perceive people, and so we've also interleaved some things where it's like Moxie, when they see people in the hallway, the robot will meep or make hard eyes at people. And so not only is the robot helpful from a utility perspective, but also brings a little bit of joy. So we hear from staff is often just just how much they enjoy having Moxie as a robot teammate, how then they can really focus on their work. Of course, you're going to have the people that are a little bit scared of technology. I think that is like those are our hardest customers, I would say. But we see it as a challenge where it's like, hey, you might not see the value, right, with Moxie first installed because it's a new thing, but those are some of the most satisfying. Where afterwards, where they see how much work the robot does, kind of turn them around. On the patient side, there it's really funny. You kind of see like, did I just see a robot just go down the hallway? Like, and then you hear the interactions where they talk to staff. It's like, what is that? And then it's really rewarding hearing the staff say, "Oh, that's our robot, Moxie. Like, Moxie helps us, so I can spend more time with you." And the patients love that. And then finally,
That's
we have like
cool.
children's hospitals that we're in. Those are some of the most rewarding, where the kids just see the robot and light up, and they like want to hug the robot and things like that. So yeah.
That's cute. So, you mentioned a lot of like environmental components that Moxie may have to like adapt around and walk around or wheel around. What's the most stubborn real world constraint you had to design around, and how did that shape the form factor for Moxie?
This is an interesting one, just because there's so many things in the real world to say that it's like the most stubborn. So it might be better if I give a few examples. So one of the ones that come to mind is things move around the hospital, right? So our robots move in the hospital, other things move in the hospitals. Like there are tons of people have big carts that move around, and what we've realized is that we can design our robots to avoid things, but there's really nothing
Mhm.
we can do if we're there and someone comes right going around a corner real fast and runs straight into the robot, right?
Yeah.
So what we've had to do is in some of our is in our iterations of our hardware, we've had to just full on put on bumpers onto the robot because it's like, you know what, this is the real world. People need to get things to where they are. Is it anyone's fault that was a corner? No, right? Like they are doing their work to really deliver patient care as quickly as possible, and so we kind of roll with the punches almost quite literally and design for that. Some of the other interesting things I kind of mentioned, like, well, hospitals, ADA compliance, this is the form factor. I think ADA compliance is a suggestion or maybe a point in time where things were compliant. What we've discovered is creativity on where badge readers can be, elevator panel layouts. I'll talk a little bit more in my talk and actually highlight some examples and have some videos, but um, I had to think really, really carefully about the reach and form factor of our arm because you can't expect things to be uniform. People do crazy things, and it means that we have to be ready for all of that variance.
So, you brought up RoboBusiness in your talk, and one of the things that they're highlighting this year is physical AI. So, what are the must-have perception stacks for hospitals under occlusion? Like, how are you
How are we
prioritizing
thinking
that?
about that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'd like to bucket these into sort of maybe two different ways as we think about how physical AI is, how crucial it is, and what components of it are must-haves. And so, two things. Um, Semantic scene understanding is just like a must, right? You can't treat everything in the environment the same, right? If you treat people, wheelchairs, bed, that trash can, all the same way, then you're not going to be able to handle the dynamic environment in these like high stress environments. And if you treat everything the same, right, then you end up making everyone unhappy because the only way to make that system work and safe is to go slow and treat everything like it is the most, you have to be the most careful around. And so what
Hmm.
ends up happening is that you can have a robot that will just get stuck. Like it's a busy environment. If you're just like slowly inching along because you're thinking everything, right? Um, then you can't actually make the crucial delivery and do so in a timely manner. And the second thing is partially related to that is you can't just be reactive. You really have to be predictive. And so a lot of the world model work that is happening and a lot of the state of the art that's happening there is truly necessary because like we're at a hospital, you're riding an elevator, right? And this is one that easy connect with because everyone has written elevators. You've been in busy lobbies where sometimes you have to like who's coming out, who's going in, how quickly does the door close, are you going to get on before it like closes? Like those are all things the robot has to do. And in those moments, those 2 to 3 seconds actually matter a lot. So if you're just purely reactive and not predictive and thinking about how your actions are going to condition the world and how quickly you can move around it, then you're not going to make it onto the elevator. You're not going to get your delivery done. So those are some of the things that I think are incredibly exciting, and things that we've been focused on in our terms of our AI stack.
How do you homologate updates? So like simulation, shadow mode, stage rollout without really disrupting the clinical workflows of the staff?
That is a good one. Just because we are in such a like high crucial, like people depend on the robot, right? And so you really want to be careful
Mhm.
of how you think about workflow. Um, so I think about your question in kind of two different ways. One is really around installing a new workflow. Like, how do you think about putting a whole new workflow? You have to very carefully collaborate with clients. They're literally changing the way they do work, which means you have to shift the understanding of how they're doing work. So it's doing workflow design, communication. Um, and then on the product side, what you're hinting at, right, is that you have to carefully do design, rigorous testing, validating. We validate with early beta sites, right, as before we release to a
Mhm.
larger site. And simulation for us is used very early on in the testing process, but at some point you need to release it to the real world. And we actually do shadow deployments where we say, hey, our fleet's running, let's go ahead and release this algorithm. What is it saying, right? Of course it's not full, we're not going to have full understanding because your actions will change things. And if you're running in shadow mode, you're not actually changing your action, but it gives a very good sense before we say, okay, we're ready to release to our first canary site, then a larger set of beta clients, and then the rest of the fleet. So we do it sort of very staged on the client design perspective with a lot of communication and collaboration, and then when it comes to the entire fleet.
Are you doing any simulations with like emergency rooms? Because I feel like that type of environment is a little bit more hectic and chaotic than, let's say, another like department, like the labor department where babies are being born. Like, are you doing different kinds of testing and simulations for those different types of environments in the hospital? Or are you just going off of like a like a basic standard for everything?
That's a good question. So that we think of our testing comprehensive, where you have to think about all the different cases. And then we
Mhm.
will we will encounter situations we didn't imagine we would encounter. And so for us,
Mhm.
because our robot fleet is constantly out there, if we see something like that, it's like, great, that is another example, another corner case that we couldn't have possibly imagined. And we only know it because we were deployed. So we can pull that into our data set, pull that into our testing, and then continue to then use that to improve our robot. So um, that's my long way of saying, yes, we consider the differences. Like there's
Mhm.
no simple one test. I wish there was. That would make QA a lot faster. But we have to think about ways to add these corner cases to our system, but then also be smart about how much time they take.
So in terms of like ROI, because I know that there's a lot of like different businesses and companies that, really need that data for ROI to justify
Mhm.
investing in something that's automated or robotic. What should hospitals specifically log to quantify ROI? Is it delivery counts, nurse time, return, response latency? Do you have any like recent benchmarks or milestones we can cite for that?
Yeah, I kind of mentioned at the beginning. So there's definitely a set that we go in and we collaborate with different hospitals. So the number of deliveries that the robot does, time return, like you mentioned, are big ones. Those things then map to steps saved, right? Because they're thinking about their nurses and their staff members, right? Every step that you're taking extra is like extra burden on just honestly burden on bodies, right? Which then lead to burnout, which lead to turnover, and those ROI numbers are pretty significant, right? Just if you have to replace a nurse because they decided that the work was just too hard, which is often, right, about half of new nurses end up exiting in the first 2 years because the work is just too hard on their bodies. Um, that's those are the numbers that we really look at. We're starting to also partner with hospitals to think about, because a robot can be running 24/7 and making this delivery so that their staff members can then focus on patients, can we improve bed turnover rates, discharge rates? For example, when Moxi helps with discharge medications, it means that medication can get to the patient faster because then the nurses can focus on the discharge procedure instead of having to also run over to pharmacy and bring that medication in. So those are some of the new ways that we're thinking about how to compute ROI. And the early data is looking super exciting, but sort of the big milestones are more around, like I've mentioned, we've done over 1.2 million deliveries. And when you do the back of the envelope, that's over 500,000 hours saved.
So before I switch the topic here a little bit, I just want to give you a chance to kind of pitch your presentation at RoboBusiness. So can you give us a quick overview of like what you're going to be highlighting and why people should attend your session over other sessions that might be there at RoboBusiness?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, there are a lot of good sessions. I don't know if they should attend it over other sessions, but I'll be talking about. So we have robots, like I mentioned, over 90 robots, over 25 hospitals. Some of our oldest deployments are more than 2 years old, and what I'll be really focusing on is, what has that taught us? What systems and approaches and architectures work, don't work? What do you get to see directly from the robot's point of view? Um, and then a little bit of operationally what we have seen work, right? From a business perspective, what are the crucial things to think about as a company really trying to provide value in this mission critical setting? Those are all the aspects of what I'll be highlighting, and I think it'll be really interesting for folks to understand what it means to to be addressing this fleet and thinking about scale, because these are all challenges that, like, we've made those mistakes, right? Go ahead and avoid them, right? Learn from us, because
Mhm.
all of us are trying to do what is needed, which is really have robots help people. So the more that you all can learn from others' journeys, I think the better.
Yeah, I'll be interested to see how this affects like anybody who's interested in going into nursing, if there will be like a sub course or something added later on in their learning or process on like how to work alongside with robots, only because my daughter is going to school now for nursing, and she
Mm,
always shares stories about like some of the things and challenges that they have, like getting from one room to the next, and like when code stuff comes up, and like how challenging it is to get medicine or different components that they need to help a patient. Like, so I'm wondering if like for future learning, like if there's going to be a course added for nursing for them to know how to like work with robotics or something. It would be really interesting to see
It
how that
it would be
that
really
shifts.
interesting. We do have some of our hospitals, we've talked about like any certification, Moxi, like power users. We've had of our hospitals that do have nursing schools attached to them where they bring their nurses around and they meet their robot and they understand, they get to interact. And there's like quirks about how robots work, right? That are like, oh, that's normal and that's not normal. And right. And this is how you should interact with the robot. So there's I think it's the future, and I think it's like it would be super helpful for them to understand a little bit what's under the hood, because then you could really explain some of the behaviors. But at the same time,
Yeah.
if we're doing our job right, it should be very
Mhm.
natural, intuitive. So I kind of go back and forth.
Right. I'm super excited to be involved in this sector, and I always have like my eyes open on new trends and stuff. Like my newsletters are all robotics and automation newsletters just to keep up with it. You've grown a safety critical product in live hospitals. So what leadership behaviors make that possible?
Mm. A lot of what we think about as a company is really about our culture and our values. And so one of the things that we do, so we have several values, but our number one is we call it do the most good. And it
Mhm.
emphasizes to everyone when they're joining the company and when we do work, we have a hashtag do the most work, like do the most good when we do work and tag, things like that. Because every single delivery has a patient on the other side. And you have to carefully design, you have to carefully think about that across all of your SOPs, about the way you design robots, to even thinking about how do you communicate a change on a release, right? It's a big deal because everything that's happening impacts a patient eventually at the other side. So for us, is we've really built it into our values, and then our values really carry on from our culture, because that's super important, because you can't put a chief safety officer in every single meeting. It's not going to work or
Mhm.
scale. So we've really thought about it from really from really thinking about, even from recruiting, that we are a mission driven company, and that's something we lean very excitedly into.
I know that's like a big topic of conversation now within manufacturing is like, changing the culture to be more positive and negative. And I think, there's different things that companies can do when it comes to like hiring and recruiting potential employees, like making sure that they align with their core values, I think is massively important. When you are working with like your board or advisors, how does an AI advisory board move the needle versus advice, quote unquote, theater?
Yeah. Um, we've taken an approach where it's a combination of being prepared and keeping people up to speed. I think that's the challenging thing with any advisory board is you're hanging out the highest level. You're not in the weeds in the day to day. So what information can you share such that you can get them up to speed for them to give you actionable advice? And if you spend all your time just giving updates, then there's not much that can be done other than, right, like super like, oh, try this, right? So you really have to think about that. So for us, it's very intentional preparation, more individual check-ins too. So you have the whole advisory board come together for updates, but then we also have separate one-on-ones, and that really
Mhm.
makes it truly a collaboration, so that things actually make a difference, as opposed to generic advice that might come about because there's just not enough time and detail about how the business or how the system works.
Do you see like any one scaling mistake that robotics founders keep repeating? And if so, what is your advice to like avoid it?
This is an interesting one. I feel like like there's a lot of things, right, that can cause,
Mhm.
right, robotics companies to fail. The one that we have been so laser focused on from the beginning that I feel like we've done a reasonable job so far avoiding it is really just having laser focus on your customers and deploying as fast as possible, so you understand product market fit, so you're not just in the lab and demo phase for too long, right? I feel there's a lot of robotics companies that are like, I'm just going to build the perfect product, right? I'm going to heads down, I'm going to get the robots to like execute perfectly, and then I'm going to go deploy and people will buy it. And you're like,
Mhm.
well, like early on at Diligent, we spent our first 2 years like the hackiest proof of concepts, right? Just because it's a general purpose robot. You get all sorts of ideas. And we went from like, we delivered like linens and bed sheets straight patient doors. And the next day we like took out the trash and like we tried it all. But it's only because we went through this process by putting a robot out really quickly did we learn that to then say, this is what our customers need. Now let's go and iterate and really build that flywheel. Um,
Mhm.
and I think it's just because in our DNA we have human robot interaction in our in our DNA, and that's allowed us to do that versus wanting to have that perfect engineering solution.
So one of the things I'm getting really excited about, and I see it with the communities that I'm connected to and the groups that I follow, there seems to be a lot more women coming into robotics. And I just wanted to kind of get your personal insights on and thoughts on, what sort of things can companies do to really predict the staying power for women in robotics? Like, is it labs, internships, competitions? Like, what were some of the things that really got you? I know you explained some of the classes that you took, and just seeing things on the screen wasn't enough, but like, and you explained your turning point, but where do you see the most success in like getting young women really excited about robotics and saying, yes, that's what I want to do for my
I think,
career?
yeah, I think robotics in itself is already like I mentioned my story, right? Like, is the pull. I think what you're asking is then, well, lets them stay, right? What lets them really continue their careers here? And this for me, like resonates a lot as well, because I think crucial to my success and staying is just honestly mentorship. Having people who have seen the problems, know the challenges and roadblocks, and can work with you to the brainstorm and figure out how do you get through that. Because otherwise, you really you hit really big challenges and you don't have a support group, like those are the easiest ways to fall out and be like, hey, you know what, this is not for me, this is too hard, I don't know how to get through this, versus having a very strong support system. And so this is where, like, labs, internships, like in my case, right, I had lucky in my master's and my PhD, I had some amazing lab mates and my and advisors that really were there to help me get through these when things got challenging, and then didn't let you drop out unless you truly really wanted to, right? And I think that is crucial to really continue to empower women to make a difference in the robotic space.
So for anybody that's early in their career, or young women who might be considering entering the field of robotics, are there any like one skill or one community that they should really invest in to help prepare them coming into the career?
Ooh, that's an interesting one. I don't know if there's one community. I know, for example, Women in Robotics is a fantastic one where
Mhm.
they do a great job providing events. They have a mentorship program, like I mentioned earlier, how mentorship is so key, where they actually connect you to different people in industry or academia based on what you're interested in. So that
Mhm.
could be a good one to just to get in. And uh, I was also thinking that in general, from a skill perspective, to be able to grow and be flexible is so important. And what that means concretely is the space of AI is moving so rapidly. So figuring out where do you get your technology information? What blogs, what papers, what research are you keeping up with? Like that, like the skill of how do you stay on top of technology? Like that is a skill, because if you learn one piece of tech, that's not good enough, right? Like, how do you continue? And if you can master that in your career, like AI is just one piece, right? There's so many things over, right? The span of technology, that if you can teach yourself how to quickly learn and stay on top of these things, that is, I think that's transformational.
Yeah, you're definitely not going to get bored in this space if you decide to enter it, because it's always. I got really excited when I saw Boston Dynamics on television for the America's Got Talent competition, and they did something they'd never done before with Spot, where they actually made him flip on national television. So it was just really exciting that they got as far as they did in that competition, and it brought awareness to robotics in a fun way. So I did get a little irritated with some of the judges' critiques, because they were like, oh, we wanted to see more of this. And I'm like, it's a robot that flipped. Do you understand? Like, that's cool. And yeah, it was a little irritating. But Vivian, I want to thank you so much for coming on today and sharing some of your story and talking about some of your presentation that's going to be happening at RoboBusiness. But I do want to give you an opportunity to just kind of give us a heads up, like what's something that you're looking forward to with Diligent Robotics? Like, is there a teaser you can provide us on any future projects that you're working on, or new features that you're incorporating into your robot Moxi at hospitals?
Let's see. We are We actually just announced, but more will come out, is we're really starting to think about healthcare is one space that we have robots making a difference and impact, but we see there's a lot of other markets that really need robots and can make a difference. And we're excited to take our first step into that next market. And I think we made, there's a recent post that we're really looking at we've joined the Age Tech Accelerator collaboration with the AARP and really starting to look at that. So a lot more news about that has will come out. But yeah, that is most recent that got kicked off late last week.
Very cool. Well, I will look forward to seeing more information coming out about that. For anyone tuning in, if you are going to be attending RoboBusiness in October, please check out Vivian's session. It's actually happening on Thursday, October 16th at 1:30 to 2:15 PST time. And it's going to be in room 203/204. So it's the two combined rooms. Vivian, what is one ask that you have for our audience today?
Say that again. Sorry, I cut out.
So if you had one ask for our audience, what would your ask be for them?
Attend the talk and ask good questions. I always love feedback on what is clear, what is not clear, what is exciting, what is not, right? Like I think for us, we're so in our bubbles about what we're trying to do that it's always good to have a fresh set of eyes and ideas on how to approach the space and where we should go next. So
Very cool. Well, to anyone that's tuning in, thank you so much. Again, Vivian, thank you for coming on to Mavens of Manufacturing today and just talking about robotics. A lot of people are looking forward to this conversation. If you missed part of this conversation, no worries. It will be on demand on our YouTube channel. Also, I will include all of Vivian's LinkedIn information and Diligent Robotics information in the recap article that I'll be releasing later this week. So watch out for that. And I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your week and happy manufacturing month. Thank you, everybody. Bye. This episode of Mavens has been sponsored by Fresh Horizons Group. Fresh Horizons Group is a family-run company that was founded on the premise of helping organizations and businesses better tell their story through high-quality branded apparel and promotional items. Freshen up your brand by contacting Fresh Horizons today at freshhorizonsgroup.com.